lot to cover off on Amazon. You and I are less commerce folks, but this is interesting. The company now has 3 $10 billion plus a quarter businesses now. It's not just a cloud and commerce. It's also cloud, commerce, and advertising business. And by the way, they're going to start shooting rockets into the sky soon, and they're going to have a fourth business that I expect that will compete with SpaceX that's going to also make money. What's that?
Kuiper. Led up by Panos Panay.
Kuiper. Anyways, feels like a Street Fighter character or something. Kuiper. Anyways, so the company double-digit growth, $187 billion in the quarter. It beat its earnings by a long shot. It guided sort of conservatively. And by the way, this is why I think everything's been selling off. I didn't specifically say this, but everything's been selling off. Some of it's been the guy there's been a little conservatism in the guides from these companies. I think everybody's still a little unsure. I mean, we saw those tariffs. Wasn't it only like the Monday of a week ago that tariffs were going to take our economy to zero? The market had gone down 10% overnight. Crypto sold off 35%. It seems like every quarter we get one of those days. The Japan carry unwind thing, the DeepSeek thing. It's becoming more and more frequent. But anyways, the revenue is growing, very, very sharply. AWS still grew 19%. Now that means, I always have to say this, that at 31% for Azure and Google, there's probably some share shift that's going on. There's also a law of large numbers thing with AWS. It is so big that growing 20%, you're talking about over $100 billion run rate now. I think it was 107.
Yeah, Jassy claimed 115 billion run rate.
Okay, 107, I think, over the last 4 quarters, maybe, and 115 run rate.
Yeah.
And so that's really, really good. The company did come out, Pat, and say they're going to spend over $100 billion in CapEx.
And that's the biggest number we've heard so far.
And then they made some other strong announcements. This is the company that's really kind of taking the challenge of infrastructure in the nose. They've been really successful at Graviton. I think they're trying to double down and really get utilization of Trainium 2 to hit the market. They threw out a number of about 40% more efficiency. The only thing then the current Hopper, I believe. So I think that's versus H200 maybe. I've been trying to make sure I'm 100% accurate on unpacking that one. This is another situation where the efficiency is great, but software is going to be a big factor. Trainium is not the same as a GPU in terms of being able to be flexible for all the use cases. But for specific use cases, this is exactly what we've been saying: higher performance out of a lower cost and power envelope. So that was, something to be optimistic about. How much of that 115 billion ends up where? That's a little bit of the assessment that people need to do, because a lot of people, I think, make the assessment that 115, that's all going to NVIDIA. It's no, there's a lot of parts and pieces in there. You got to buy the high bandwidth memory. You got to buy the CPUs. You got to buy all the networking gear. You got to buy the power and conditioning gear. I mean, in some cases, this is physical building sites running in cables, power, cooling technologies. All that stuff is part of these spending numbers. But there is big dollars being spent. Every one of these companies is indicating they have clear line of sight to enough revenue to justify this type of CapEx expense. The other thing, though, is you have to look at these companies' balance sheets. What else are they going to spend the money on? I mean, these companies that have trillions and high hundreds of billions and trillions, this is the big bet. This is the future. They have to invest big. They have to invest out in front of it. And don't be surprised that the average person, the average analyst investor, cannot see the future. I would bet on the Musks and the Jassies and the Satyas to have a better understanding of the revenue future than the people that are working at banks that are set to evaluate them.
Yeah.
And so there is a little bit of that. I keep going back to trillions of agentic and assistants operating concurrently, all driving pennies. As they said in the movie Office Space, Pat, fractions of a cent rounded off into an account, with lots and lots of transactions. I think that's what the future looks like. I'm very optimistic about Amazon's business. And on a positive note on commerce, Pat, they did overtake Walmart this quarter, so biggest in the world.
Dan, great discussion. I'm going to hone in on did leave me a little bit of oxygen, but
big company.
I mean, this company beat on EPS by 25%. Okay. which it wasn't a decline. In fact, it was the largest beat in 4 quarters. So, and then revenue, if I look at the average of their beats, they missed in June and they beat in March and September. It was right along that average. So, yeah, there's kind of this reckoning. I did a lot of digging on this AWS number. I went through the transcript, and there was a tremendous conversation about supply chain constraints for AWS. And I got to tell you, and hey, we're going to get good in the second half. Isn't that crazy? Microsoft talked about the second half, and we're going to talk about Google and the challenges they had. AWS said better in the second half. The funny part is nobody has said GPUs yet. Not a single person. What Andy Jassy did talk about a lot was even cooling apparatus, right? Which, by the way, could be related to this rumor about NVIDIA GPUs and cooling systems out of these ODMs. So here we are. We have 3 people talking about supply chain issues and 2 saying they're going to get healthy in the second half. The only thing I can think about is GPUs and cooling, but nobody has said the word GPU. So kind of some investigation I'm going to do. I'm going to do my specific channel checks and see if some people will tell me directly.
What do you think it is? What's your gut?
What's that?
What's your gut?
My gut is that it's GPUs and everything else to make a GPU server. Cooling. Also noticed that Lisa Su talked about back half loaded, right? So there's something about something that is going to make this back half loaded that has to do with AI, because the capacity constraints were pointed out by Andy that this was an AI challenge. But with all that said, this company has the best array of silicon at scale, in-house and also merchant silicon. Their CapEx is staggering, folks. $100 billion. What is that? Was that twice what Google put out there?
No, I think Google said 75, but they were like,
okay, sorry.
No, I'm just saying, I think it was 65 Meta, 75 for
Microsoft was 80 billion dollars. So, and if you look at where they have Trainium and Trainium 2, Inferentia, the homegrown silicon they have, they've got a pretty wide array to get there. But listen, action item for Pat and his team, figure out what this second half bottleneck is. But all in all, we're looking at $115 billion AWS business that is incredibly, ridiculously awesome profits, and that has not subsided. And when you've got growth, big growth on big numbers with big margins that are going to continue with increased investment, I think they're going to do just fine.
Hey, we didn't even really mention, but these companies too have this amazing customer zero story. Amazon, all this AI is amazing for commerce, advertising. It's not just to sell, instances in the cloud, Pat. All this infrastructure they build out, and Meta is probably the best story in this particular case. But there's a lot of that going on with these companies. Google and its search business, they can build things, they can use them, make money off them, and then also resell them. So it's pretty powerful. I tend to think the sell-offs are more about perfect pricing and a little bit of uncertainty.